Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tau 3 podcast. Tau 3, the audience of 3. TAO 3. Tau 3 podcast, because I know there's only 3 people that are going to be watching this. Probably only one. Maybe Tim watches it on his work shift. Josh, I doubt it. Blake, maybe. But that's what we're going to call it for today. Lot to unpack here. Huge Game 7, kind of a letdown in a lot of different aspects, but you know, that stuff can happen. Pretty crazy NBA season as a whole. We'll go over that as well. Kevin Durant got traded. We'll look at the West going forward, the East going forward. We'll talk some mock draft. I've just released my first Lottery 1.0 NBA mock draft. And yeah, we'll see how this goes. First ever pod here. NBA Finals. Obviously, the big takeaway would be Tyrese Halliburton getting hurt. I think there was I don't want to say 50-50 chance, but anytime calf strain, especially with what happened with Kevin Durant back in, I want to say 2019, this is something that can happen. Very unfortunate, but if you're Halliburton, obviously you got to try and play through this. You don't think, or you don't know if you'll ever get back to this situation again. Game 7 of the NBA Finals, or even the NBA Finals in general, because as fun as the Indiana Pacers are, as good as the Indiana Pacers are, they're not a team that you can just count on getting back, even though they could. You know, maybe if he was healthy next year, you never know. The East is a little down. They seem to have something figured out really, really good. It's just very unfortunate. Indiana, probably the story of these playoffs, maybe the story of the season. They came into this season, the first 35 games, our boy Tim can tell you all about it, was not very good. And Halliburton has admitted he was not very good as well. So from where they started to where they are now, it's pretty insane. And I think a lot of the NBA media, a lot of people had the Oklahoma City Thunder winning and pretty much being a dominant team this season. But I think everyone saw Indiana's run last year as pretty fluky. And for them to start like that and end up in a Game 7 of the NBA Finals, where I think everyone can admit they had a real chance, and I think a lot of people believed in them to win that game, whether it was, you know, however it would have took to get it done. And Halliburton started incredible. He had those first three-pointers. You're thinking, shit, is this his game to really cement his legacy here? Pretty insane. I think Rick Carlisle deserves so much credit. One thing you have to say with the Indiana Pacers, I don't know the GM's name, but he obviously deserves a lot of credit. I'm sure they work in unison, but they had a vision. And this goes back years ago. And okay, to some guys maybe fall in their lap, maybe, but you can tell they had a vision, because I don't think you go out and trade for a guy like Pascal Siakam without having a clear vision of what you want your team to be. Yeah, they had Miles Turner. They go and trade for Tyrese Halliburton, which I don't think the NBA even knew was available at the time, but they tried it and they made it work. You know, they got Tyrese Halliburton. They go and get Pascal Siakam. They had Miles Turner. They draft Benedict Mathurin, TJ McConnell, Neesmith. They go and get from the Celtics. And do you think that's an NBA Finals team? Probably not. But Carlisle has been in the NBA for a long time. He had a vision on what he wanted his team to look like, what he thought it could look like. He probably thought he was crazy. And to get that team to the NBA Finals and the Eastern Conference Finals back-to-back seasons, he deserves a lot of credit. I would say he thoroughly outcoached the Oklahoma City Thunder coach this whole series. It's pretty incredible what they were able to accomplish this season, and I think he deserves a lot of credit here. Maybe after a run like this, you got to really think, okay, where does he rank, at least in this century of coaches? I think you got to go Popovich 1. I guess you go Phil Jackson 2, just because he's done it at 2 different spots. I'm not the biggest Steve Kerr guy. I think a lot of people in this chat know this, but there's no saying why he can't be the 3rd best coach of the century. Steve Kerr is one with the Warriors a lot. I think he didn't do the groundwork to get to that point. I think in situational, his rotations, like, I think he's a good coach, obviously, but I do think he's a little overvalued, if you ask my opinion. Um, it's pretty insane what he was able to walk into. Were they that good when he got there? No. But I think Mark Jackson deserves a lot of credit for building the foundation of that franchise, making Steph, I think he's always tough, always had a killer instinct, but like kind of developing that more, helping Klay Thompson come along. So I'm going to put Rick Carlisle third in this century. Steve Kerr, I guess you put him in the top five, even though he kind of looked into it. In my opinion, I'm going to put Spoelstra in there, obviously, because even post LeBron Heatles, those 2 runs he had with the Heat was pretty special. Kind of similar to what Carlisle did, not the best rosters, but getting to the finals twice is no easy feat, never mind being an 8 seed or whatever they were the first time in the bubble. Pretty insane. So Rick Carlisle obviously deserves a lot of credit here. And, he's proven this before with Dallas. He's done this, with the Pistons before Larry Brown took over. He helped build that. He's been doing this for a while. I guess he's the oldest coach to ever have coached in the NBA Finals, which is insane. He doesn't look that old, and Larry Brown looked old as shit, I'm not gonna lie. But pretty crazy on his part to take this team, have the vision 5 or so years ago to make this what he wanted it to be. I mean, he was in Dallas. It kind of got rocky at the end there with Luka. Luka's my guy, everyone knows. But it was pretty much, they were clashing heads. Where was he going to go from here? He goes to Indiana, and I don't think if you told anyone then, okay, 5 years from now, you're going to be in the NBA Finals, you're going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals twice, I don't think anyone would have took you serious if you had that take. But he did it, and he deserves a lot of credit. I think the story of this playoffs, like we said, is probably the Indiana Pacers. But on the Oklahoma City side, I have come around on them. I think in the chat, we all talked all year how they're frauds, KFC, UFC, whatever you want to call it. I was not a believer. I thought in the right matchup, they would get exposed. I thought SJ was top 5, but I didn't think he was. Now I see him as the second best player in the world right now. Jalen Williams, I was not a believer. Chet, I'm still not completely sold. I think defensively he's a good shot blocker, and offensively has his moments, but I'm not sold there still. Obviously the ceiling could be pretty good, pretty high with his size and upside, but I don't know. I'm not completely sold on him. What I will say though, the defense is as legit as everyone said, and probably even better, I would say, because that is the main reason why they won the NBA championship this year. Offensively, I know SGA is outstanding, and some guys have moments. Jalen Williams, he has his moments as well. But they come and go. I wouldn't even say I don't know what the rankings would be, but they're not special on the offensive side of the ball, I would say. SGA is a special player. He can get his shot pretty much whenever he wants, whether it goes in or not, obviously depending on the day. But he can get his shot whenever he wants. But as a team in the half court, they really struggle against good defenses. And then in playoff series, like you saw this playoffs, when you have 7 games or 6 or 5 games, whatever it is, to prepare for them and like see how you want to attack them, they can have some really, really tough moments. And I think the Denver series really showed that, because anyone that watched Denver this season, they are not a good defense. Jokic, Murray, those aren't guys you necessarily say, oh, they're great on-ball defenders. Aaron Gordon has his moments, but Michael Porter Jr., like, what are we doing here? Russell Westbrook, no guys that by any means should be able to stop you consistently in the half court. But they had a lot of success on the defensive side of the ball against Oklahoma City. And I still think that is the work in progress going forward, as other teams maybe figure them out more defensively or get them in tougher matchups in a 7-game series. I do think the regular season they'll be always this dominant because they just play so hard. It's a tough ask, either going in there or they come into your house one time to prepare for them. they're coming 150 miles an hour, and it's really tough. So I think ultimately, they will continue to be a very strong regular season team over these next couple of years. Now maybe they feel more confident in these playoff series because, they figured out, how to overcome adversity, whatnot. So I think they'll be fine. I do not see dynasty. I see maybe one or two more championships, which is still a huge feat, And I think Presti's obviously an outstanding general manager. They have a lot of first-round picks going forward. They're not great first-round picks, let's be honest here. And you look at the list, I don't have it in front of me now, but it's not as good as I originally thought it was. And they have to hit on guys in the 15s, 10s, which they have done in the past. They kind of have a recipe of what they think can work, what should work for them and all that. But once these guys start getting paid, I don't think Jalen Williams has a big contract. Chet doesn't have a big contract yet. SJ is going to make maybe $80 million or something crazy like that. That's pretty insane. I don't think it's as much of a guarantee as people think as Wemby gets older, as Luka gets more settled into LA and they start building that team around him, like how Dallas was able to do that before. We don't have to get into that, but God, that was stupid. And I think, the Rockets getting Kevin Durant, the Rockets have a lot of similarities to Oklahoma City with their energy and athleticism and speed. They just didn't have that guy to close out. Did the Rockets become more dangerous this year? We'll get into that later. But I do think the West as a whole will get better. And I know we thought the West was so good this year, but I also think the West was we figured more things out. And again, we'll get into that later. But I believe they were more ready for this than a lot of these other teams were. A lot of flawed lineups in the West, and they were able to take care of it. And their defense is as good as I can remember a defense being since when I was 12 years old, and the Pistons were really good. But even then, they had just like a good starting lineup of defense, and Ben Wallace, Prince was very long. They seem to have like 8 guys that just harass you like piranhas, and that, if they can keep some of those guys, I know Caruso's already under contract. Lou Dort, who knows what ends up happening there, but they have the legit defense. And you think, okay, Jalen Williams gets better offensively. I think he had some really, obviously, a 40-point game in Game 5. That's outstanding. Chet, he's going to come and go. I don't think it'll ever be as consistent, especially because he will never get the chance, barring injury, to really work in creating as many shots as he would need to practice in game-like scenarios to become the offensive player I think some people in the league think he will be. But maybe he's just a really good third option on the offensive side, and that's all they need him to be, because SGA is really good on offense, and Jalen Williams will continue to get better. But overall, OKC deserves a lot of credit here. They are way better than I thought they would be. I still think, in my heart of hearts, maybe it's because I'm such a big fan, Luka gives them the most problems, and the Lakers could have made that an interesting series. Maybe they don't win that series. I think they're flawed as well. But I think Luka's their toughest matchup and will be their toughest matchup going forward. Besides, obviously, Wemby will give them a lot of problems as well. But I think it'll be very interesting to see what the Lakers do this offseason and how they try to match Oklahoma City, because Luka does not fear them. If you look at the game logs of the past, Luka goes crazy on Oklahoma City. And I think if there's anyone in the West that they, in their heart of hearts, are like, damn, we still have to go through him. We didn't have to go through him in this playoff run. I think it's him. And we can get into that later. But yeah, congratulations to Oklahoma City. You're better than we thought. SGA, you deserve all the credit. I know a lot of people give you shit, foul merchant. I just think it's part of the game now. I've accepted that. A lot of the best players, maybe it's not that egregious, but they're doing some sort of that. You can name them, and they're doing it. And Jalen Williams, I think he deserves a lot of credit. I have him now in my top 20. I know the chat does not agree. Whatever. It is what it is. I think he's a top 20 player now, especially when you add what he does on the defensive side of the ball. On-ball defense is very long, very athletic, switch on anything. He's very good. But yeah, congratulations to Oklahoma City. Indiana, hell of a season, hell of a playoff run. It's unfortunate the way it ended, and I hope Halliburton heals fast. It's probably going to be a year off for him, probably going to be a year off for Tatum, probably going to be a year off for Dame. So the East is going to look insane next year. We'll see how that plays out. We'll get into that next. So, the West going forward. Let's start with the Kevin Durant trade. Kevin Durant was traded to the Houston Rockets for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the 10th overall pick, and 5 second-round picks, I believe. If you're Houston, to me, this is a no-brainer. Dylan Brooks, I think he gives more to teams than he gets credit for because of his kind of antics. But they have enough length, athleticism, defense now that obviously if you can get Kevin Durant, you can expose Dylan Brooks to whoever wants him. Jalen Green, I know Josh thinks highly of him. I'm not sure why. I think Timmy said it best. Zach LaVine is probably your ceiling there. Talented, yes. Will he have months in the season maybe where he just goes crazy? I think so. Will he have highlights? Absolutely. But as it goes on, you kind of realize like, okay, he's still erratic. He still is not making great decisions with the ball. When you have Şengün there, you probably feel more comfortable running your offense through them. So then, okay, he's off the ball. How good is he off the ball? I just think if you're Houston, and I think it shows to the league, like it was pretty obvious after this last playoff series. I know they wanted to get Kevin Durant, but he was pretty much expendable to whoever wanted him. And if anyone really, really wanted him, they could have gotten him, I think, for a decent price. Nothing too crazy. He was under contract too going forward. And no one really seemed to bite. We'll see what happens here in Phoenix. I know he, in the news is, or not news, in reports is on the market in Phoenix. So we'll see if anyone comes to grab him, what that price looks like. But yeah, I think it's a no-brainer if you're Houston. I don't know where Jalen Green as your main, not even main option, but like most talented scorer gets you. Probably not too far, and it showed they couldn't get out of the first round this series with a really, deep team. And if you have watched Houston Rockets basketball this season, you understand how their by far biggest glaring weakness is closing games, half-court offense in closing settings. And there may not be still to this, I'm not going to say that, 5 better players than Kevin Durant right now in that exact setting. As long as he's healthy, which is a big if, he's been hurt a lot lately. He is as dynamic a scorer as there's probably ever been in basketball. He's really good still, even if he's at an older age, 38, 37, whatever he is. I still think for a year or two, as you're bringing along Amen Thompson, Şengün can, very gifted passer. You can run a lot of your shit through him still. And Kevin Durant is the best possible star to bring into a situation like that because he doesn't need the ball. He's never needed the ball. He's been so efficient scoring his whole career that he's just never needed the ball. And you can still bring along Amen Thompson. Şengün you can still run the offense through him. You can still bring on the Tari Easons. Jabari Smith is still growing. The fact they didn't have to give up him in this trade is huge. If you're Houston right now, athletically, you can kind of go toe for toe with OKC, and you can probably give them a lot of problems on the defensive end as well. Do you have enough good ball handlers now to handle that piranha-like defense Oklahoma City brings? We'll see what Fred VanVleet can do in those situations. Can Amen Thompson develop more, to be determined? Şengün in that setting, that'll be a very interesting playoff series in my opinion. And now you bring in Durant, who he's a tough guy to guard even at 38 years old. I think if you're Houston, the package you had to give up there to get Kevin Durant, very light in my opinion. I think you got to keep the Phoenix pick from 2027. God knows what they'll look like then. and to keep Jabari Smith, who, could still be growing, could still be getting better, was the number 3 overall pick at one point. It'll be very interesting to see what they look like next year. I expect them to stay in the top 2 or 3 in the West regular season, along with Oklahoma City. And, overall, they're going to be a very dangerous team and a tough out for everyone. The fact they could take Golden State to 7 games, even though Golden State wasn't nearly as good as they've been in years past, with that major flaw at closing games in the half court, I think shows how talented they are everywhere else. They just needed that guy, to step in and to make those shots for them, make those decisions for them in those tough moments. And I think they got it with Kevin Durant. Home run deal as long as everyone stays healthy, which is a big if. He's older and he's the body frame of someone that wouldn't stay healthy at times. But on paper, it looks really good, and I'm all about it for Houston. The next team I want to go after here is LA. I think last season you had a lot of ups and downs with Luka. Obviously, the biggest story of the season this past year, until this Pacers thing happened, but even then, was how egregious this trade was with Luka and the Dallas Mavericks. If you're the Lakers, you couldn't have been happier. I think if Dallas did do anything before this trade, they kind of showed you what a team around Luka could look like and how far you can take that team. And now I think, we'll see how confident LA is. They just were sold to new ownership. That should be a big difference. They have a good track record. I know it's in baseball, but I think in a lot of other ventures as well, they've shown they are confident. And the Buss family has not shown that in any way, shape, or form over the last 10 years, 15 years. So I think LA is definitely trending up. I think this next year you will get the best version of Luka in a regular season format. I think playoffs he's always been pretty solid. Regular season he's always been really good, but sometimes the focus can go here and there. I am very interested to see what LA looks like next season, what bigs they bring in. LeBron, obviously, it's insane what he's able to do at this age. And as long as you're able to get guys, and that's why Luke is such a great get for them to help carry the load during the regular season. I think you probably gained a couple more years on his tires for him. And he showed very well last year how he's able to play off the ball in more of a traditional power forward role. And I think Luka, having a year to settle into LA now, I think it just shocked him to the core last season. And he was still very good, but I don't think he was as great as he's been the years before that. And maybe it's the kick in the ass he needed to get over that last hump. And like I said earlier in this video, I think he's the one player in the West, at least, I think maybe in the NBA in total. Like guys have had success. Joker had a good series, but he had, they just surrounded him a lot, and it was very tough for him as well. But Luka, he does very well against Oklahoma City. He did very well last year in the playoffs, this year in the regular season. I think he's the one guy where the style of team that they have just does not bother him like it does other players, because he already is used to playing with the contact. The guys that'll give Luka more problems are like the Jaden McDaniels types, where they're longer and he can get the contact, but they can stay with him. And he still does great, obviously, but that's why Minnesota, I think, is a tougher matchup for him than I think Oklahoma City is, because Oklahoma City is more guard-like. And I could be totally wrong here, but I think there's more players, how he grew up in Europe, Spain, Real Madrid, EuroLeague, that can compare to the Oklahoma City type defenders, 6'4"-ish, 6'5", play on the hip. I think he's been playing with that for a lot longer than these 6'9" athletic types of the Jaden McDaniels. So I think he just feels comfortable playing with them, and he just does not fear them at all. I think the Oklahoma City Thunder, defensively at least, have earned the respect of the NBA. And if you haven't by now, then you're probably just an oblivious human, like a John Morant. But overall, I think he's the only guy in the West where I can say I feel comfortable with him going into a series like that if he's fit, if he's in shape, because he just has never had a problem with them to this point. And LA, what are you going to do this offseason? I'd probably get rid of Austin Reeves and see if you can get the best possible big, get more shooters around as well, and kind of build that team similar to what Dallas looked like in 2024. And you know what that can get you. I feel very confident that they will do that. I wouldn't say very, but I feel confident that they will do that. And, with LeBron there too, he helps a lot, obviously. Even at this age, he's just so smart. He's going to do all the right things he needs to on the offensive side. Defensively, he can spare his minutes. But in the playoff series against Minnesota, he had some really strong defensive moments. So I'm very excited to see what LA looks like next year. And I think if they do it right, they can be very dangerous come playoff time. My next team I will go to is Denver. And I don't know how long this will take because I have no idea what they do from here. I don't even know what the moves are from here. The first move probably starts with moving Michael Porter Jr. and try to get more depth on this team. Joker, I still think is the best player in the world. I think a lot of people would still admit that. Maybe Shea has more of a following now, but I still think the consensus would be that Nikola Jokic is the best player in the West, in the NBA, in the world. And as long as you have that, you definitely still have a chance. They were very close to still, with this flawed roster, taking down Oklahoma City. It was a pretty spectacular series to watch. I think kind of gets forgotten now by the Pacers' run, but that series was pretty incredible as well. I believe, I don't know what the move is, if I'm being honest. I don't know what teams even want Michael Porter Jr., especially at the cost that he has. I love Christian Brown. I think he's a great role player. Jamal Murray, maybe he has a good year next year. He's a little inconsistent, but when he's on, he's a very good player. But he's a guy that's going to usually struggle with the Oklahoma City type defense. Aaron Gordon was great. Russell Westbrook probably won't be back. So it'll be interesting to see what they look like next year. But as long as you got Nikola Jokic, you have a chance. I think what he was asked to do in the regular season was a bit too much. If you're Denver, you want to get guys that can help carry the load in the regular season so he's fine by the playoffs. That's why his stats were so elite in the regular season, because he just had to do it. But yeah, I think overall, I don't know what those moves look like. I know they'll be in the thick of it. I know they'll be fine because they have him. Let's go to Golden State. What moves do they make? I think it obviously will start with Kuminga. What they do with him, it still blows my mind that they couldn't find a way to use him in a series especially against Houston, where they were so athletic. But Kerr, like we said earlier, his lineups can be questionable at times. Just look at the Olympics. I know I'm a Celtics fan, but yeah. It's a topic for another day. I think Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, they're older players, and this will probably be their last go at it with those two together. I think you can't bank on that for much longer than a year. 2 would be asking for a lot, in my opinion. I think Pods, I don't know what they see in him to make them believe that he is so untouchable in these trades. I think I've heard in some reports that he is more accessible to other teams in the league, but again, who would even want that unless you have a superstar that he can kind of play off, what they kind of do in Golden State as well. I believe that when it comes down to it, they will be like they have been besides 2022 in the last, say, 5 years, in that little play-in bubble spot. Maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they don't, but ultimately, I think their best years are definitely behind them. I don't see them making a run in the foreseeable future in the West. I think, they can talk themselves into it maybe, but I think realistically for 82-game stretch to have to probably play in the play-in or close to the play-in again, it's just not looking good for Golden State, in my opinion. We'll see how good of a coach Kerr really is, but I don't think he's as good as the rest of the world would like to think, and I don't think their team is built as of right now to really compete in the West, especially. Maybe if they were in the East, they'd have a puncher's chance, but I definitely don't see them in the West being able to compete with the likes of Oklahoma City, the newly shaped Rockets, and we'll talk about Minnesota next. But yeah, especially as they age, I don't see that happening, I'll be honest. The last team I will talk about in the West, Timmy and Blake, the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think with them, and I think it kind of goes to this season as a whole from the Western Conference standpoint. Do they have a lot of depth in the West? Yeah. Are there a lot of teams that like are pretty similar from, we'll say, 3 to 10 or whatever, 3 to 9, whatever you want to say? Last year, at least this past season, yes. But I don't think. Well, actually, sorry. I do think what this season showed is how far people are from, say, the Oklahoma Cities and what they need to do to kind of move forward. And I think Minnesota falls into that category because I'm like, Ant is young, but he definitely needs to take a jump for the Timberwolves to really get over that Western Conference Finals hurdle, which is still an incredible feat for him, especially at that young of age and as that team. To make the Western Conference Finals twice in a row is incredible, and I think they should be very happy for that. But I do think they've kind of hit a roadblock there, and that's why they were flirting with the Kevin Durant piece. They probably need to bring in something else, some type of ball handler. I've mentioned Trae Young in the past. I don't know what that cost is like, how realistic that is, but as long as you have those other defensive pieces, you can get away with the Trae Young on your team for how poor as he is defensively. I think Minnesota, they have to make another move. I don't know what that move is, but it has to be either a ball handler or someone to help get them into the offense so Anthony Edwards is not required to get them into every set, or Mike Conley at his age is required to get him in every set. I think that showed up glaringly in the Oklahoma City series, and that's why they struggled a lot in that series. But I do think with Minnesota, there's a real chance that they make a move. Maybe they're a little better in the regular season this year if they keep some of the core. I don't know what happens with Julius Randle. Clearly, it's not going to be Kevin Durant. So maybe they decide to give this core another year going forward. But they definitely need to bring in another ball handler and a point guard to help Anthony Edwards kind of take the load off. I do think he will get over the hurdle one of these years. I hope it's while they kind of still have part of this core, because I don't know like what free agents will go there in the future. Maybe he leaves. I don't think he will. I think he loves it there. But when you think about it, now that I'm thinking more about it, they have to do it soon. But Oklahoma City is still really good. Houston just got better. LA is going to get better. San Antonio is going to get better. Were these 2 years the years to do it? I don't know. I think Anthony Edwards definitely has another level he can get to, and I think he will get to. He's just way too talented to not get there, and he seems to be a really hard worker as well. But do they get back to the Western Conference Finals next year? Is that a tall ask for this team? While a lot of teams should be getting better, who knows? It will require another ball handler, Anthony Edwards taking another step, and then we'll see, Oklahoma City is still a pretty tough matchup for them, I believe, with just the flaws they have offensively at this moment. But defensively, when they're on their shit, they can pretty much guard anyone. And it showed in that LA series, especially. Luka had a lot of problems with that. He had some good numbers, but that's a tough team to score on, and it's not easy. And after 5 or 6 games, it's not a fun matchup to play. I'm thinking if you're Minnesota, if you can somehow go through a playoff run and avoid Oklahoma City, and if someone else were able to take them out on another side of the bracket, then I think you have a real chance, maybe to get back to the Western Conference Finals, to get to the finals. But I do think with what their roster looks like right now, Oklahoma City is a very tough matchup for them. So yeah, those are my West going forward. Those were the top 6 teams from last year, in my opinion. And now we will go to the East. Obviously, my Celtics had a devastating injury to Jason Tatum. I would say most Celtics fans would agree. as a whole, as a roster, we just not as a roster, over this last season, we just never looked the same or were as good as we thought we would be. And I think we were like, okay, championship hangover, the regular season, we had some injuries and things like that. But overall, I just did not think we were. I know I think we had a month towards the end of the season where we were really good. But overall, we just didn't hit that peak that I think a lot of us thought we would get to, and kind of build that dynasty that everyone was talking about. And now the bill is here to be paid, and Tatum's out for this next season. What happens with Jaylen Brown? Supposedly he's in trade talks. I'd be shocked if he gets dealt, but I don't think it's impossible. Porzingis is probably gone. Drew Holiday is probably gone. I think Derek White will be here. Pritchard should be here. I don't know. I think this team will look a lot different next year. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It might be a good year to kind of reset. I think they're still going to be too good to not at least be a playoff team. But, it might not be the worst thing for us. We've been battling close to Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals for about pretty much since Tatum's been in the league. I know we've gotten upset a couple times, but they've been right in the thick of it for the last 8 or so years since Tatum's been here. So it may not be the worst thing for them to kind of reevaluate things, see what it looks like for the next 5 years instead of just going all in for this next season. Even Tatum, is it worth bringing him back at all next year? Maybe not, unless you just see the East as so weak. But we're going to get into some of these teams. I think a couple of them are pretty interesting. And I don't think it's worth bringing Tatum back for another season off an Achilles where you want the next 5 to 10 years for Tatum to be special. I wouldn't really stress this next season where you still have a lot of moving parts and a lot of different things that can happen for your roster. So I'm more on the let's let Tatum sit a little bit here. Let's kind of regroup here and see what it looks like a year from now. The next team is Cleveland. Pretty disappointing playoff run, I would think they would say. Some people may not be shocked. Overall, I believe they're probably a move away. I don't know if the move is Jared Allen. I don't know if the move is Darius Garland. But I don't know. I don't think you can keep this roster the same and come back. Well, maybe if the East is just so weak next year now with Halliburton hurt as well, that you can just run it back and maybe you think you pull through. I just don't think so. I think in a playoff format, you get 5 or 6, 7 chances to figure a team out. With 2 poor defenders like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell on the floor. I know you got Mobley behind them. You could have Jared Allen behind them. I think you can get away with 1, but I don't think you can get away with 2 over a 5, 6, 7 game stretch. So I know Darius Garland's been in a lot of trade rumors. If I'm the Lakers, I am going to get Jared Allen if I can. Not whatever the cost, but I think he would fit great with what they need. And I think he's played enough basketball, maybe not big games, but he's played enough basketball in his career to be ready for an environment like LA. Whether they do that or not is up to them, but I think that would be the guy to go get. And Donovan Mitchell, I think, will always kind of be who he is. Tremendously talented scorer, someone that can get you 40 on any given night. Might have a game where he drops off the next, but I think he's one of the top, we'll say 10 offensive players in the league right now. And there's no reason to think that with him, but you couldn't win the East. But I just think you got to do something. They got to get one more piece if I'm going to say, they're the team to beat in the East, even though they had a great regular season this past season. I overall think that they're a move away. Maybe the East is just weak enough to where they're not a move away. But in my opinion, I think they're a move away. Probably Darius Garland, maybe Jared Allen away from being okay, you guys are ready now to go make it through the East and take on whoever comes from the West. And that leads us into the New York Knicks. Only the New York Knicks, I think, can have as good of a playoff run and within 7 days be just as dysfunctional as they've been the last 10, 20 years. But that's just kind of what they've been. I don't think it should surprise anyone that they've turned back to the dysfunction. But that's just kind of what they've been like. It's kind of what New York sports has been like, if you want to think about it. We can get into that on another day. But just a lot of questions. It seemed like they were going in the right direction, and then all of a sudden, they're just not. They fire their coach and they try to hire 10 other coaches that are already with a job in the NBA. Just not a very smart move on their part. But hey, that's just kind of what the Knicks do. I don't think I could ever bank on them having, what's the word? I don't think I could ever bank on them being a consistently successful team in terms of like making the finals. Do I think they can win a series again next year? Yeah. Jalen Brunson's really good. They have a really good roster, which, they can still move around a little bit. But I don't think I will ever look at the Knicks and say, yeah, I can like put money into them being a consistent playoff team. I know they were pretty good last year, pretty good this past year, but I just think they'll mess it up. And I think this whole coaching search is a prime example of why you can never have faith in this team. Maybe it's a James Dolan thing, I don't know. But ultimately, I think it's very hard to put faith in a guy like that, an organization like this. Even when they made all these great moves, Mikal Bridges, Anunoby, they bring in Cat, things are going so good. Even in that Pacers series, you kind of realize, like, yeah, you can't bank on this team, winning a finals. So even if they were to beat the Pacers, I think Oklahoma City would have just ran right through them 4 or 5 games, and then they're back at square one anyway. If your goal is to make the finals, maybe in this next season with all these injuries going on, you think, okay, yeah, we can make the finals. I don't think so still. I think I put Cleveland ahead of them, and we can go into some other teams as well. I think Indiana obviously will be not as good with the loss of Halliburton, but they could still be frisky. I don't know. I'm not sold on New York. I'm not a fan of New York right now. I think the whole coaching search is just a prime example of they will somehow get in their way. They will get in their own way when it comes to an important time, and ultimately they just won't be good enough when it matters most. Yeah, they beat the Celtics, and they may have beaten them with Tatum, without Tatum, it wouldn't have mattered. But I just don't have any faith in the Knicks to make the right moves when needed in the most crucial times. So that's my thoughts on New York. And that's going to lead me into the team I believe has a chance to make the Eastern Conference Finals next season, my Orlando Magic. If you watched the first whatever weeks it was of last year's season, and you watched what Paolo Banchero was doing to the NBA, it was incredible. He had flashes of top 5 in the league. Brilliance. And I think as a group we're pretty in unison with what we think of him, but I really think if there's a player in the league next year who will make that holy fuck wow jump, it's going to be him. They bring in Desmond Bane, which is a glaring need, perimeter shooting, another guard to help just run an offense effectively, because really they had some pretty poor offensive numbers last season. I know they had a lot of injuries as well. But if you tell me Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane, Franz Wagner, and Paolo Banchero, and then you still have Jonathan Isaac, you still have Wendell Carter, that is a good 6 to start with. I know everyone talks about Anthony Black. Is he going to take that next step? Maybe he doesn't have to be used as much now that you have Desmond Bane on your team. That's a good 7 guys to go into a playoff series with. If Paulo takes that next jump, if Franz, he's shown incredible flashes as well. Desmond Bane is one of the best shooters, if not minus Steph Curry, might be the best shooter in the NBA. And they just added that to this team who already defends at a very high level. They have playoff run, championship not maybe Oklahoma City level, but very, very good defense when, everyone's healthy. Suggs, Isaac, all those guys are playing. So you have the defensive piece already taken care of. Now you bring in another scorer to help with that. If there is a team to watch out for next season, especially come playoff time, if everybody is healthy, it is the Orlando Magic. I'm telling you, the older Banchero gets, the harder he will be to guard. 6'10", 250, playmaking, shot making. He's the guy. That is the team, I think. If anyone takes advantage of the East being a little lighter, it's them. I really believe that in all my heart. I think Banchero, I'm going to go on a bold take here. I think he gets first team All-NBA next year. I think that's the kind of jump he can take. Similar to like Cade Cunningham this year, but even more because he's bigger, he's stronger. He can do a little more defensively as well. Like Paolo Banchero, sleeper for first team All-NBA next year. You heard it here first. I don't think we have to get into Indiana. We kind of talked a lot about them before. I think the last team I'll try to talk about is the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis seems to be staying. They're kind of limited with draft capital and the moves they can make. Dame Lillard, an Achilles injury, seems to be a common theme here this playoffs. Overall, I think with what the East looks like, especially with the Pacers being hurt now with Halliburton, you have Giannis, you have a chance. And they gave up Indiana a pretty good series, even though it was only 5 games. Every game was pretty close. I don't know. I do not know what the move is for them, what they're even able to make move-wise. But they really need Kuzma to step up. And if that's the situation you're in, that's not a very good situation to be in. Ultimately, I believe, with Giannis, you have a chance to do something, especially what the East looks like if they have the right, matchups they can play around with. They still will probably be a playoff, at least top 6, maybe higher playoff team this next season. But ultimately, they're not in a very good spot for their future. And I hope this isn't the case, but there's a chance that by, say, December, January, it's not going great for them. Doc gets let go, and maybe Giannis gets traded to a team that isn't doing as well as they originally thought would be at that stage. So I hope Giannis, I'm a big Giannis guy. I hope he can figure out a way to kind of maybe take advantage of this weaker East next season, but they're not in a great spot for the future going forward. So I wish them the best, but I do not think, actually, I'm not going to say I don't think. I think they can make a run in the right set, but they need to make a move or two, and they need guys to kind of step up a little bit. So that is my East and West going forward. Some of the top teams in both conferences, what I think. To close out this video, we will now go into my latest mock draft. So I have a couple trades in here. There's some picks that are pretty obvious. I actually, which I don't think is groundbreaking, but I did predict the Suns would trade the 10th pick. The Suns would trade for the 10th pick in their deal with Houston. I made this about 2 days ago, so I have the receipts. If you want them, I can show you. So this was already made 2 days ago before the Kevin Durant trade happened, and I just happened to be right with the Suns and Houston trade. So to no one's surprise, the first pick, Dallas, Cooper Flag. I think we'll say over the last, I don't know how many years, but Flag is the safest pick I think you can make in recent memory. Maybe it's 10 years or so, because the work ethic supposedly is like legendary work ethic, like what they say about Adrian Peterson, what they said about Kevin Garnett, what they say about some of these just like risk your life competitive type people, Kobe Bryant, whatever guy comes to mind. I'm sure there's guys I'm missing as well. So with that work ethic alone, I think you at least are going to get the best of whatever he has to offer. Injury, obviously, history is pretty good, and hopefully it stays like that as well. That would be the one thing that can derail anybody. But when you have that work ethic and already the athletic gifts that he has, we'll say 6'8", 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, plays both sides of the floor, has already shown incredible growth on the offensive side. And I think with that work ethic, it's only going to get better and better. It's a pretty safe bet that he's going to be at least a perennial all-star. Whatever the ceiling is, I think that's what people kind of like to debate. I don't know what the comp would be. I don't see the Tatum. I see Tatum on like the defensive side, but like I think he'll be a better defender than Tatum. But Tatum can switch everything, especially at that size, extremely rare, while being able to carry a huge offensive load. I think that's where the comparison is. But I think Tatum's bag coming out of college was a lot more advanced than Flag was, but I don't think he'll need that as much. I don't know what the comparison is for Flag, but I ultimately think he's going to work. He would have worked wherever he went. He happens to go to a Dallas team where he can kind of ease his way into maybe being the third scorer. Maybe he starts as the second scorer because Kyrie will be hurt most of the year next year. But talk about the ultimate mulligan in life. Nico, I don't know how, well, maybe we can get into some conspiracy shit if we have to, but what he was able to fleece and with 1% get someone that's as much of a lock as Cooper Flag to be, some generational player is pretty insane, and probably saved his job, probably saved his name, and in his world, this is the ideal player he wants, which makes me think even more that there's something way too fishy about this whole deal. But then again, it's almost too obvious to pull a little conspiracy like this, because it's almost like, okay, we'll give you the number one pick. It's like, holy fuck, that's way too obvious. But Cooper Flag is what he identifies in a superstar, from the mindset to the way he plays. So that's like, how does someone get that lucky? It's a little too lucky if you ask me, and I'm sure if you ask a lot of other people. But yeah, ultimately, pretty insane that they got the number one pick. I think he'll be a great player. I don't know if he'll be an MVP. He could be, he could not be. I'm not here to say one way or the other, but I do think I'm 100% positive he'll be a perennial all-star. Which leads us into our second pick. Another team very lucky to get this pick as well. You get Dylan Harper from Rutgers going to San Antonio. I mean, they pretty much, not only by getting this pick do they make, they give Wemby a running mate maybe for the next 10 or whatever years, as long as they both can stay healthy, but they also gain some leverage with De'Aaron Fox. Like, if there's a glaring need on their team in the near future where they want a bigger scorer or a bigger whatever to come in, De'Aaron Fox is the guy that's probably going to get moved there. And by getting Dylan Harper, this is probably the last time they'll pick this high in the Wemby tenure, barring injury. This sets them up extremely well. And then they didn't go for Giannis as well, so they keep some of these other good role players like 3-and-D guys, good wings on their team. They're set up as good as anyone. I think they're set up better now with this second pick than even in Oklahoma City for the next, say, 5 to 10 years. Because Wemby, I think, in theory, could be the best player on both teams. You get Dylan Harper, who we'll say could, from everything you hear on the reports, could be a top 20, 15-ish player in the NBA when it's all said and done, in his era, not all the time. So you get Wemby, a guard like that they can grow with together, and then you got all these other younger players, and then who knows what happens with De'Aaron Fox. Maybe he stays and that works out great, the three of them, or they move him to get another outstanding player or a group of players back for him. Couldn't have gone better for San Antonio to get this second pick, and they're going to be able to get a guy who in any other draft probably is a number one overall pick. I see a lot of comparisons to Cade Cunningham. So if you told me, okay, Wemby, you get to draft Cade Cunningham out of college to go with you for the next 10, 15 years, I think a lot of people would be pretty excited about what those two could look like together. And that is the potential here with Dylan Harper and Wemby. So extremely fortunate if you're San Antonio, but also good for the league, because now Wemby gets a running mate. Hopefully that for the rest of his career, they can win championships and at least be a very respectable, competitive team come playoff time. And now we go to my first trade in the draft. I've heard that Philadelphia is looking to move back. I think Charlotte is in a mode or a era or whatever you want to call it, situation now where they need to figure out, one, LaMelo Ball, two, what are we doing here? They've been so bad for so long, and I think they ultimately need to make a decision on LaMelo Ball and maybe just as an organization as a whole, what direction are we going? I have them trading up with Philadelphia for this third pick. I heard some rumblings that this is a possibility. I think VJ Edgecombe is a good fit for them here. Kind of brings some defensive stability for them, has a good shooting stroke, and ultimately I think it gives them two options here. One, okay, now we're putting a guy that we need in Charlotte, a serious defender, another good wing, but like not the scoring type wing, more like do all the other things for you wing. And they need to make a decision on LaMelo Ball. And also this kind of gives them LaMelo Ball insurance to where, okay, we get VJ Edgecombe, who has a very high ceiling. If LaMelo doesn't work, this is the guard, him and Miller, we go forward with. If it does work, we got a great three-man pairing, and we can build around that in the East where you never know what it's going to look like year to year. I think this is the move for Charlotte. I think it's a smart move for Charlotte. And I think Philadelphia, they have so many guards for the value of that third pick, not being able to get those top two guys. I think there's not a guard that they could get there that they wouldn't be able to get at 4 or 5 or whatever it would be, that would even play right away for them based on the McCain minutes, Maxey minutes, even Grimes playing good for them. So I think ultimately Philadelphia moves back to the 4, and they could even move back even further, but for my mock I have them at the 4. And Charlotte trades up and gets VJ Edgecombe, which I think is a very good pick, and it gives them insurance on both ends, like we talked about before. Number 4, Philadelphia. If they were to stay, I think Colin Knippel's the guy here. Might be the most ready for what his ceiling would be. I think that's, if there's any criticism, okay, what does the ceiling look like for a guy like him here? But he does a lot of things really good already. A lot of people are very high on him in the draft process. He could pretty much fit with any roster in the NBA. Do you need him to be your main ball handler? He can do that. Do you need to play off the ball? He cuts at a high level. He can shoot at a high level. He can do that. He's not the most athletically gifted player on the defensive side of the ball, but he gives a lot of good effort, and you'll at least get the most of what he has. And I think that's, for some guys, all you can really ask for. For Philadelphia, I think it's not a glaring need with what they have, Paul George, all those guys like we talked about before at the guard spot. But I think they're trying to move on from Paul George, and maybe a team takes him, maybe they don't. But he is as much plug and play as there is in this draft here. And I think it would be a great pick for Philadelphia for the foreseeable future. And I think ultimately, he's a worthy top 5 pick, and you're getting a worthy top 5 player at that spot. Who knows if he'll be back here? Knowing Philly, they probably will, because they're not very well run and they're kind of in some tough contracts at the moment. But I think Colin Knippel's a very good player and a very good pick at number 4. Number 5, I got Trey Johnson from Texas going to the Utah Jazz. And you may say, okay, they're so guard heavy. They've drafted so many guards. Why would they draft another guard? I think ultimately this guy here, it's a very loaded at the top draft here. In the right situations, a lot of these teams ahead of them, they already have, they're very guard, or they already have a main ball handler, main decision maker on their team already, to where Charlotte wouldn't need a guy like that. Philadelphia wouldn't need a guy like that. But Utah actually gets pretty lucky here. I think they've drafted a lot of guards, but none of them have really shown that extremely high ceiling. But Trey Johnson, he might be the guy that finally pops for them. No more bricklayers in Utah. I think he might be the most athletic, offensive, the best scorer in the draft at this moment, at least. He has an incredibly high ceiling, all-star type ceiling, like some of these other guys we've already talked about. I think Utah just needs to swing here for him. I know they have other needs on the team. They already have a shit ton of guards, but I think with him, they finally get their guy that they can okay, we finally have a star. I don't know what they do with Lauri Markkanen, but I think for them, when they drop to 5, they're probably devastated, but they're going to leave this draft very happy getting a guy like Trey Johnson, who in other drafts would be drafted higher. Maybe last year he's the first pick in the draft. And this draft there's just so many teams that already have that main dominant point guard on their team to where they wouldn't need a guy like him. He's not quite at the Harper level, but he can be a really, really, talented scorer, main decision maker for a team like Utah where they can build with him going forward. There's some people that think he's the third best player in the draft, and I think in a draft like this with this much talent, that's a very high recommendation, or whatever the word would be, for a guy like that. And I think Utah finally gets their guy that they can build the pieces around and kind of go forward and give the fans something to be excited for. That leads to number 6. I think Ace Bailey is not doing himself any favors here in this draft process. I don't think he's a bad kid. I just think he has very poor advice around him. Ultimately, he's an extreme talent, and before the season, people saw, is he number 2 pick, is he number 3, whatever. And I think if you're a Washington, if you told them a month or 2 ago you're going to leave the draft with the Ace Bailey, I think they would be very happy. Also, if you're a Washington right now, you really don't have many other options here. You kind of have to swing for the fences on an Ace Bailey, even though the ceiling's very high, the floor could be very low. He could just turn into one of these guys that scores and does really nothing else. But there is a chance it hits, and it hits big. And there's a chance it can hit bigger than maybe anyone not named Cooper Flagg in this draft. So if you're Washington, I just think ultimately you gotta swing on this one. Hope for the best. It may not work, but if it didn't work, you weren't going anywhere anyway. And do you want him getting influenced by Jordan Poole, another guy who kind of takes some crazy shots and does whatever the hell he wants out there? Probably not. But ultimately, you got to swing here. And I think at 6, if you get to leave with a guy like Ace Bailey, where at least the ceiling is what it is, ultimately I think you're pretty happy if you're Washington. I think the fan base can get behind this, and hopefully it hits for you guys. I think it would be nice on both sides. I think Ace Bailey gets what he wants, right? A team where he can kind of run into, take as many shots as he wants, and really grow into the star, which he's desperate to be. But ultimately, I think the Wizards just need to do this. And they should be pretty lucky that Ace Bailey, a talent like that, drops to number 6. Number 7, Pelicans, kind of in that same boat. They have a little more that you would say, okay, star power, I guess would be the word. But Dejounte Murray won't be back. I think he tore his Achilles. CJ McCollum is very old. You probably need to bring in a new guard into that mix to go forward with. And then you got Jeremiah Fierce from Oklahoma. I think there's a lot of different opinions on him and what they think he can be. Not the biggest guard in the draft or just overall, but he does have a lot of offensive talent. And if you're a team like the Pelicans, why not? You need a guard. God knows what happens with Zion, but they seem to be pretty heavy-handed with Zion and not going to let him go, diamond hands, whatever you call it. And ultimately, I think it's a good pick for them. I think he becomes a pretty good guard for them, and in a spot where they need, maybe him and Dejounte Murray can be a good little duo going forward, and he'll actually be able to have the chance to get a lot of in-game reps this next season, and by the time Dejounte comes back, maybe they can hit the ground running for the season after. Which leads to pick number 8, the Brooklyn Nets. I think they're a possible team that can trade up, maybe with Philly or someone else. They have 4 picks in the first round. But for my mock right now, I'll have them staying at 8. And I have them drafting Cedric Coward from Washington State. And this is a guy who has had quite the basketball journey. Started D3, went to Eastern Washington, played 6 games at Washington State this past season. And I think he is going to be the guy. And I think at 8, I think the first 7 picks, in some way, shape, or form, that's going to be the order. Those are the 7 guys that will get picked first. And then at 8, it kind of starts to get more, hard to predict. But I think from what you hear in reports, Cedric Coward is someone that is blowing teams away in the draft process. He has a little bit of the Jalen Williams type build, 6'5" with the 7'1", 7'2" wingspan. I know he's a little older, but that could be a good thing for a team like Brooklyn, who may want to hit the ground running finally. Very high ceiling for this guy. Extremely athletic, kind of gets to his spots when he needs to, can score in a lot of different ways, has a lot of ability to maybe be a plus defender as well at the next level. And if you're Brooklyn, I think this could be the first maybe shock. I know people don't have him this high in some of their mocks, but I think he's a guy that'll get drafted earlier than I think a lot of people think. I keep saying think. He'll get drafted earlier than people would expect. Number 9, the Raptors. Kind of a what the hell are they doing going forward? Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, Emmanuel Quickley, Grady Dick, Jacob Poeltl at center. I think with this pick at number 9, they add another center, Malawach from Duke. Guy is 7'1" with like a 7'7" wingspan. This might make them the longest team in NBA history if they do this. Ingram has a 7'3" wingspan. Barnes has a 7'2" wingspan. Both 6'8". Grady Dick is 6'7". Those 4 guys on a team, it's pretty insane. I don't think there's a glaring, we need this thing for the Raptors, even though they could get better probably everywhere. But, why not? The rim running and rim protecting centers are something that everyone's trying to find in the NBA. He fits the mold. He's very raw right now, but maybe in the Raptors timeline, they allow him to grow into it. Or right now, for what they need him to do, it's perfect for him to just come in and rim run and defend the rim. So I think the Raptors get a good pick here with Malawach from Duke. And then number 10, like I said earlier, I predicted the trade that the Suns would come into this. So this was before the Kevin Durant trade was official. I thought it would happen before. I have the Suns taking Derek Queen, another guy who's pretty polarizing in this draft. Some guys like him a lot. Some guys don't like him as much. I think the more I watched him, I think in the right setting, I think it's going to work. I think the Suns could be the perfect fit for him. They've been needing a center for about 2 years now. They just got rid of Durant, so that's another scorer that won't be taken. I think Jalen Green eventually gets moved as well. I think Derek Queen is a good fit here in Phoenix. It also helps probably with the fan base. Losing a guy like Durant, you get to bring in a college guy with a pretty big name, talented player who they can maybe be a little more hopeful with going forward instead of bringing in some project from God knows where, and then you have faith or try to have faith in your front office and ownership, which may be very tough to do at this moment with the Beal contract they just gave out and some of these other things they've been doing over the last couple of years. I think Derek Queen is a good fit here. I think he will work in the NBA. To what level, I don't know, but I can definitely see him being a successful big. He's not a Sabonis type player. He's a lot more gifted offensively, but I can see him having maybe around that type of success. Now that it's positionless All-NBA, I don't think he'll be an All-NBA type player, but I think he'll be a good pro. And I think he pairs well with Devin Booker. And I think ultimately it's a win for the fan base. And I think it's a good fit for both sides as well there. So I think Derek Queen to the Suns works. The shot may always be consistent. The defense, you never know. But I just think he has a great feel for the game and kind of knows how to play basketball. And ultimately that will carry him through as he learns to fix some of these other things that may currently be a problem for him. Number 11, Portland Trailblazers. Another team that doesn't have maybe a glaring need, but needs to get better everywhere, if that makes sense. I have them taking Danny Wolf from Michigan. Why do I have them taking Danny Wolf? Danny Wolf grew up as a guard who kind of grew to 6'11", 7 foot, whatever he is now. And so he kind of plays like a face to the basket type player. And ultimately, I think with a guy like Klingon as your center, you probably want a four to be more of that talent than a guy that's going to be another back to the basket, rim running, protect the basket type center, big man, whatever. They have a shit ton of guards. They don't need another guard. Danny Avdia, I think, is currently their power forward, but can probably mix in at the three if needed. I can't think of the guy's name from Belgium, but he's a really good 3-and-D type player as well. I think this is a good fit for both sides here. As much as they have good guards, they're more scoring guards. Danny Wolf is a pretty good playmaker at his size and position. So, maybe that's a guy that comes in, helps get everybody else involved, helps space the floor with Klingon, which they will probably lack going forward. And, it's a little bit of a reach here at 11, but I think it's a good fit for both sides. And now we go to number 12, the Chicago Bulls. I was responsible for following the Bulls last year in our bad teams draft. And if there was one thing that I realized with this team that they desperately need, it is defense. They were horrible on the defensive side of the ball. I think they have some pretty good scores. They're pretty good on the offensive side. So if I'm them, I try to bring in someone that helps me with defense immediately. I think Carter Bryant from Arizona is that guy. I think he's a little bit raw offensively. He doesn't have the good counting stats that maybe you would want. But a lot of people really like him, a lot higher than 12 in this draft. He could be someone that goes much higher than 12 depending on the team that's up there and what they really want and need. Carter Bryant is probably a little bit away on the offensive side, but defensively has all the tools and makings of a really good defensive player. And if you're Chicago, I think that's ultimately what you need most right now is a good defensive player to come into that lineup. He can still play fast, he's very athletic, but you got to be able to stop people eventually, and I think he helps them with that. My next pick, the 13th pick in the draft, I had the Atlanta Hawks taking Kasparis Jukusionis. I'm living in Europe, I should be better at these names. But I think another guy that could get drafted higher than 13, a lot of people like him. I think he fits really good with Atlanta because it gives them, maybe in the beginning of his career, a guy that can run the second unit. He's a very strong playmaker. I think his scoring and shooting has the tools to be very good, but right now isn't there to be like where the Jazz are picking or Pelicans, or why some of those guys are a little better in that, where they probably need that more. But he has great size. The shooting stroke looks good, so it should be fine, just not quite there yet. But his playmaking and as being a bigger guard is something that I think is what is attractive to teams in the lottery. I don't think he gets out of the lottery. I think if anything, he goes higher than this. But I think if you're Atlanta, you get another guard you have a shit ton of wings, so you don't need that necessarily 3-and-D type guy. Even center, I think you're pretty solid. You bring in Kasparis, and I think he helps run your second unit. And then maybe by the time you decide to make a decision on Trae Young, he's ready to step into that starting point guard role. And, a lot of people had him a lot higher to start the season. And during the middle of the season, I think he dropped a little bit towards the end. But I think if you're Atlanta and you leave with this guy at the 13th pick, you're very happy, because I think a lot of teams and maybe other drafts, he would have been a lot higher. So I think it's a good pick for them at 13. And that leads to the final pick of the lottery. I have the Brooklyn Nets trading with the San Antonio Spurs at the 14th pick. I think unless San Antonio loves someone here, they have a lot of guys already on the roster, that are playing a lot of minutes. So maybe get more picks for the future if you may need them. And I think if you're Brooklyn, why not get aggressive? You have 4 picks in the first round. Are all of them going to hit? Probably not. Might as well use a couple to move up and get a player that I think is a very good player. I think I have Thomas Sorber from Georgetown going here with the Brooklyn Nets. I think Nick Claxton's days in Brooklyn are probably numbered. I think they're going to be in the market for a new center. Thomas Sorber, 6'9", 7'6" wingspan, perfect for the modern NBA. good offensive low post game. Shooting numbers aren't great, but I think he has all the tools to be a good center in the NBA. He came from a college program with the worst college coach in the nation, so that's not a good benefit to him. But ultimately, I think he is a type of player where he will work in the NBA. He has the length for it, has the athleticism to probably switch if needed. Offensive game looks like it'll be fine for the NBA. So I have him going 14 to the Brooklyn Nets. And that completes the first podcast. This is live, one take, no cuts. I don't know how I did. We'll have to watch the film, see what corrections need to be made for the Tau 3, the audience of 3. That's where we get it from, because there's only 3 people that are probably going to watch this, maybe 1. But yeah, NBA pod. We'll do other sports maybe throughout the year if anything glaring comes up. But that is my final words here. Thanks to our sponsors. We have none, but we'll have some soon. Timmy, I hope this makes your work playlist for podcasts. Maybe it's a light day for pods, and maybe down the road when it gets a little lighter, you throw this on, and the other 2 guys, we'll see. Thank you.